All right, good morning everyone. My name is David Needham, and I'm going to be presenting using paragraphs to weave a beautiful content tapestry. This is going to be a beginner session, really an introduction to the paragraphs module. So if you've never heard of the paragraphs module, you've never had a chance to use the paragraphs module, I'm going to describe in summary kind of what it's used for, how to get it going on your site, and some use cases for why you might want to consider using it. So my name is David Needham. I've been involved in the Drupal community for about 9 years or so. As of a few weeks ago, I work for Pantheon as their agency and community training manager. So that means I get to travel around to camps and cons and teach people how to use Drupal and how to use the Pantheon platform. These slides were also co-created by my good friend Les Lim from the Twin Cities. He unfortunately was not able to make it to that camp, but he is the author, co-author of the session, so props to him as well. So I'm going to start off just with a brief scenario. Here's an example of a situation where you might want to consider your options before continuing. So a client will come to you and they say, okay, we have our articles, or we have our basic pages, we have content. We would really like to add a couple columns in the middle. Like right in the middle of the page, like not at the top, not at the bottom, but somewhere in between, some pictures and maybe a video or something like that. We just want to put two columns next to each other. And we're like, okay, no problem. Like you can do that. That's not really a big deal. You can just put in some body text, right? I mean, you're a coder, right? No, you're not a coder. Okay, well, this is probably not going to work for you. And this is not really a best practice anyway. This is actually what is referred to in the industry as a blob. It's just a conglomeration of code. There's some styles in there to kind of float left and set the width, and then you might have some images in there. Maybe you have some embedded media, YouTube video or something. That is bad. There's lots of reasons why it's bad, but first of all, it's bad because the person who asked for this functionality could never do this. They don't know code. They couldn't do it. So Les and I are suggesting you should say no to the blob. And first of all, the blob is bad for computers. The blob, when you have this blob of content all mixed together, it's really difficult for computers to parse it and kind of pull it out into separate pieces. Your search engine optimization isn't going to be as good. You can't use there are ways around everything, of course, but it's just less difficult for computers to know what to do with the information that's involved in a blob and to kind of parse through it. It's also bad for non-coders. For a scenario with a person who might just be a content entry person, if they don't know code, they don't know HTML or CSS, they would never be able to do that. But also it's bad for the maintenance down the road when they need to make a little change. If a developer came in and kind of put that in for them, they would never know what to change. It's also bad for backwards compatibility as your site gets older and you never know what the code put directly into the body field is actually going to do. So it's just bad all around. Stay away from blobs. Unfortunately, Drupal gives you lots of options, lots of alternatives to just using the body field. Here are a few we're going to talk about today. You could use fields and template files. That's the first one we're going to mention. And this is okay, but it's not super awesome. Right out of the box in Drupal, you can pretty much do this without any extra modules. You add fields, you go into the theme, you add some template files. But again, this is difficult for people to do and to change. This is difficult for a person who's not a coder to be flexible with throughout the website. They have to go to a themer every time they want to make a change to it, or to apply it to a new page, or to make some sort of a variation. And so it's difficult to change, and again, it's difficult for the content entry people. There's also Display Suite. I'm actually a really big fan of Display Suite, and I think Display Suite can be used very well with the Paragraphs module as well. But if you're looking to do just the scenario that we talked about, where you have two columns with maybe an image and a text field, something like that, you can do it. It's great that Display Suite gives you layout options in the UI. You can drag and drop. But you still have to know some code. It can still be inflexible because it's the same sort of pattern every time. And you really kind of need to know a little bit of extra code in order to get it to do exactly what you want. And then of course there's panels. Panels is highly customizable. It gives you lots and lots of options to choose from in the interface, which is great. But it can also be really confusing. If someone is not already familiar with panels, a content entry person, and they're trying to just add a couple columns, they're probably not going to understand why they have to go through the typical panels editing process. They don't want to have to go through the process of learning how to use another interface. And while panels gives you lots of flexibility, it can also be a little complicated. But again, you can use this together with the paragraphs module. You don't have to just choose one solution. So if we look at these three solutions we've picked out so far, it's okay, but none of these are really great. But I think the best option is paragraphs in this case, if they're wanting to do something like this. Of course, it's my presentation. I define paragraphs as a module that lets site builders weave together beautiful pages using clean, ordered, XML-friendly content. And of course, if it's beautiful, if it's intuitive, if it has a good interface, it's going to be a lot easier for the people adding the content. And if it's XML-friendly, if each little individual piece of media is broken out into an individual field, it's going to be a lot easier for computers and other websites to parse through that and to know exactly what to do with it. It's also going to be a lot more searchable. It's going to be performant, all those different things. So let's go into a little bit on how paragraphs work and how we set it up typically. So you don't have to do this, but Les and I typically replace the body field on our content types with the paragraphs field. So the body field is typically where you put all this stuff into one place. We just kind of get rid of the body field and instead put in a paragraphs field. So here's an example. We have the node title at the top. We might have an image, so maybe this is an article. And then we have a body field that might have a kind of mashup of everything. We just swap that out and we put in a paragraphs field that could contain any number of paragraph types. And we'll get to that just next. So you can create as many paragraph types as you want. They're a little bit like content types, except it's a good idea to break them out into different the different types of content that you're adding. So if you have audio, you might have an audio paragraph type. If you have embedded YouTube videos, you might have a YouTube video paragraph type. Text. You can also have, actually let me just flip through the list. You might have a text field. It's just a simple text field that you could reuse throughout the site. You might have a pull quote that has special CSS, pre-styled to it, so it looks like a fancy, full width, quote with little parentheses or quotes around it. You might also have an image field, or any number of image fields that have different styles or formats applied to them. Or you might have a video or audio or, like I said, whatever type of other embedded media that you'd like. And we like to refer to these as content paragraphs. This is sort of a term that we use to describe the type of paragraph that we're adding to our website. But there's actually another type of paragraph that we like to use, and we actually refer to these as layout paragraphs. In this case, we're talking about maybe you have a sidebar that's on certain pages, or on a side. Maybe you have an accordion that has some JavaScript or jQuery applied to it to style it a particular way. In this case, we're going to be going through a two-column layout. That could be another layout you choose from. And so these are typically paragraphs that have other paragraphs inside of them. So these will be kind of controlling layout on the page once they've been placed. And then there's a third type of paragraph for things like ponies. And Les gets this question all the time: what is a pony? A pony is a small horse. But that doesn't really answer your question here. It's a special case on your website. A pony in this case is something that is very particular. Maybe you're using it on only one piece of content. You're using it on only two pieces of content. It's a very limited use case. You can do that in paragraphs module, but typically paragraphs are reusable. So you want to kind of limit the number of special ponies that you have on your website. So here's an example of how you might use paragraphs on your website. So again, here's the standard, maybe an article content type. We have a title, we have image, we have our body field. We'll just replace our body field, we'll get rid of it, and we're going to throw in a few paragraphs. So we might have a text paragraph, followed by a pull quote paragraph, followed by another text paragraph, followed by a two-column paragraph that might have additional paragraphs within it. But the cool thing about this is that we could actually replace our image field at the top with another paragraph field. There's no reason not to consider that. And then when you think about adding in that image paragraph, it actually gives you the flexibility to move it around. So whereas with a standard content type, the order that you put the fields in is kind of the order that by default they get put in. But if you use paragraph fields, you can rearrange them. You can swap the two-column paragraph up a little bit. You could move the image down a little bit, however you want for each piece of content that you create. So this gives you a lot of flexibility. It gives a lot of flexibility to the content creator because they don't have to know code. They don't have to know what stuff is going on kind of behind the scenes. Another great thing about paragraphs is it actually gives you very, very predictable markup. You know exactly what the markup is going to be. You know how to then make use of theming, responsive style sheets, whatever in the future the next big thing is. By creating predictable HTML and knowing exactly what the output's going to be, you can plan and say, well, on a full page it's going to look like this. On mobile, it's going to reduce down to that. And of course, you can always put paragraphs inside of paragraphs, a little bit of inception there, but if you have the aside, you can put text, image, and full quote inside of that little sidebar paragraph layout. You could also put the one on the two-column layout at the very bottom. So let's jump back to our scenario. How could we build a paragraph, or how could we use paragraphs to really kind of take advantage of the situation? So here's not a live demo, but I kind of took screenshots along the way, an example of how I set up a website. This is just a stock Drupal 8 website from 7 months ago, so things might be a little bit different, slightly different. And I've only added 2 extra modules. I've added the paragraphs module and the entity reference revisions module, which is a requirement of the paragraphs module. So I've enabled those 2 modules, and I have the option under Manage Structure to choose paragraph types. And this is going to look a lot like a content type at this point. We're going to start just by defining a few of our paragraph types. So I'll go to Add Paragraph Type in that button there. And in this case, we've created a text paragraph type. We then want to go in and add some fields to it. So we go over to Edit. We can choose what type of field. This is going to be, again, just like a content type. Any field that you could typically choose for a content type, you can also throw into a paragraph type. So in this case, it's just a text paragraph type. So we choose a text field, give it the label text. Okay, and then we just jumped ahead a little bit. In addition to the text paragraph type, we also created a full quote and an image. So that's it. Next, we're going to move on to creating a layout paragraph type. And again, remember, content versus layout paragraph types is really just terminology that Les and I kind of create to understand what type of paragraph we're dealing with. You don't see that terminology mentioned anywhere in the interface. So in this case, we just created another paragraph type. We call this one columns 2, or 2 columns. And again, just like a content type, we can go to Manage Fields, we add fields, and in this case, we're going to add 2 paragraph fields, one for the left column and one for the right column. So here, you just go to Add Field, you choose the type of field, and you say Paragraph. And then once you do that, you kind of fill this out. You choose at the bottom in that field configuration what other paragraph types you'd like to add into this paragraph. So part of the reason why we set up the content paragraphs first is so that we could then add them into the layout paragraphs. So any of the paragraphs you choose from this list will be able to be added into the layout paragraph. Okay, so now we have our 2 fields within our paragraph type, our 2-column layout paragraph type. One is just a paragraph that says first column, and the other is a paragraph field for second column. Both of them can have all of the other paragraphs added inside of them. So once we've got our sort of basic structure of paragraph types set up, we can then go and edit our basic page. So in this case, one of the great things about Drupal 8 is that the interface across the board is standardized a lot. That's a great thing. It's also kind of a negative in this case because this page looks exactly like the previous page I was on. I switched over now, I'm in the content type section. So I'm looking at the basic page content type, and there's just a body field here. So we're actually going to delete the body field, add in this 2-column content paragraph type that I created. And in this case, we're adding this new field. We're going to choose from the list 2 columns, because we only want people to add the 2-column paragraph type in this case. Okay, so that was great. We click Save. Now we're adding a new basic page. So we're going to our content entry side, and this is what it looks like. We have a title, and we have this option here to add 2 columns. So if you want to add the 2-column layout, you can click that. And we're presented with 2 fields. These are the fields we added previously. We have the first column and the second column. So from within these 2 columns, we can choose what type of content we want to add within it. So these are just the options we selected. In this case, an image, a pull quote, or text. And we're going to try to recreate the scenario that we mentioned. So in this case, we added that graphic at the top, and then we click to add another field, and you could kind of continue that. You can add as many of those paragraph fields as you want to create the structure kind of in the way that you want it to look. So we added the image, and we added the text. In this case, I also added some H3 or whatever, an element here. You could have also added a title paragraph, or you can kind of get as granular as you want, whatever makes sense for your scenario. Okay, so I click Save, and this is what it looks like. And we're getting there, but this is not quite what we wanted yet. First of all, there's a bunch of extra text added in. There's columns 2, first column image, second column image, text. And this is just labels. All of those fields that we added within all of the paragraphs, each one have labels. And like most of the time when you add a content type, you need to go into display settings. You need to remove the labels on the things you don't want to have labels, or change the format or whatever. You still have to go through that with this. So I just went through, I removed the labels on all these things because we really don't want to see labels for these fields. And it cleaned up quite a bit. But again, we're still not quite there. We're almost there. The last thing we have to do in this case is actually go into our CSS and our theme and add just a little bit of simple CSS. This isn't quite what I would do probably, but it's very simple to demonstrate. So I'm going to float one to the left, float one to the right, make it 50%. I know exactly what the divs are going to be, the classes, it's very predictable, and then there it is. So it's working. And from now on forward, once we've added the style, every time our client adds in a 2-column layout, it's going to be this way. We can also then, go ahead.
Will they have to go through and remove labels and stuff?
No, they won't have to remove labels. That's just a one-time setup thing.
Awesome.
Yeah. Another question?
So for beginners, where does that CSS go? And since they're non-coders, how do they get that CSS?
So this is something that you would set up for the beginner in advance. So you would put the CSS in your theme or wherever you put your CSS typically. And then at that point forward, the end user would be able to use it and reuse it as many times as they want without having to know that any code is being done at all. This would also apply to things like jQuery, other effects. If you wanted to have like if you're expecting maybe this column is going to be really long and you want to give that like show more button by default whenever there's a long text with a hidden button or something, you can add in jQuery to that because it's predictable. You know exactly what to expect. You don't have to kind of recode for every single scenario every time it happens. So this is pretty good. There are still some more things we can do though. First and foremost, you want to make the experience really easy for that content editor. So when they come to you and they're asking for this, you want to give them the greatest flexibility with the least complexity. So I mentioned before I added the text field and I put the title in there, the H3 or whatever. That's kind of your call. If you wanted to be more semantic, you could technically create a separate field and then make it an H2 or whatever. I mean, you can get more particular with it if you want. But you have to kind of weigh flexibility versus complexity. You can also create really complex structures or different types of content or different layouts or different ways of working with the content. And it's up to you to kind of think about what's going to be the most useful for the people that are eventually interacting with the website. And you have to think about reusability. Is the thing that they're asking for a pony that's really only going to be used 1 or 2 times, or is this going to be reused over and over? What can you do to make it the most flexible so they can reuse it as much as possible? And there are several contrib modules that Les and I have both used to make paragraphs even more useful. First of all, there's a couple paragraphs modules that I find really useful. So the paragraph ID module will actually add a unique ID, a class, to every single paragraph that you add into your content. This is useful if you kind of need to account for things down the road. If you need, like, this particular page has this particular use case of, kind of a pony situation, you can make one particular page text field a pony without having to make a new pony altogether. If that's not clear, I can talk more about it later. The classy paragraphs module is a module that will let you create essentially a select box on your paragraph. So when you're adding a new paragraph to a piece of content, that will then add whatever class you choose from the list onto that paragraph. So for example, if you had maybe you just had a text field, you could have a drop-down list that would be pull quote, bold, call out, header, footer, kind of additional things that would then add those things as classes to that text field. So maybe you don't even need a pull quote paragraph type. You could just add this a drop-down that would say, this text field is a pull quote. This text field should be summarized with the jQuery, show more button, kind of whatever you want there. There's also several block or field modules. Since this uses all of the fields that any other content type would use, any other fields that you might already be used to using, you can use in paragraphs. So for example, the block reference module, currently not available for Drupal 8, but it is extremely useful for Drupal 7 with paragraphs, because as it is right now, it's not really possible, or it's not easy to reuse the same paragraph, the exact same paragraph on multiple pieces of content. Right now, it's not really intended to be used that way. They're kind of working on that functionality down the road. But a workaround for this is actually to create blocks, to go into the blocks section and to create blocks that are text fields that have your predefined set of text that you want to appear, your call out, your call to action that appears in different sections of the site, and then using the block reference, you can reuse it wherever you need to be using it. And then, of course, view field. If you've ever wanted to put a view in the middle of your content, you can do that with paragraphs in the view field. So if you wanted to call out a list of recent blog posts by a user, you want to put in a fancy graph or a fancy download a PDF of this chart or whatever, using if you can do it in views, you can then reference the view from within the paragraph. Lots of options there to choose from. And then, of course, the media embed one. So the video field, if you use SoundCloud, if you kind of whatever your preferences for embedding maps, videos, whatever, you could use those here too. Another great module is the view mode selector module. With this module, you're able to choose which view mode is actually being used when this is being rendered. So if you're not familiar with that terminology, essentially, Drupal has shows different versions of content based on how you're viewing it. So when you are viewing a summary, like a list of articles, you might just see a title and a teaser. You might see like a shortened summary of the body field. And whereas if you click on that article, you then see the title, maybe the call-out image, the full body text, and maybe a few extra things. Drupal lets you create as many view modes as you want. So if you're saying, I want a situation where when I'm viewing this in a view on the front page, I want the call-out image and a shorter description text. But when I'm showing this on my recent articles by this author, I just want a list of titles, or I just something else. The great thing about this is you can then create custom view modes, as many custom view modes as you want, and choose from those when you're selecting it on the paragraph. So again, it just gives you a lot more flexibility. And then we have a few pro tips. So we found that using the field group module can help make your user editing experience a little bit simpler, especially when you're talking about nesting paragraphs within paragraphs. Sometimes those lists can get really, really long, and you have to just keep scrolling and scrolling. It's hard to see when you're dragging and dropping where you're putting things. If you make use of the field groups module, if you put, like, say, let's say, for example, back to our 2-column layout, if we put a field group just inside of kind of wrapping all the fields that were potentially within each column and make those collapse by default, when you add a new 2-column layout, you would just see, you know, sort of a field set, a collapsed field set. And if you wanted to change that text field in the right column, you expand the field set and all the fields will appear and you can go down and choose the one you want. So again, it just makes the editing experience a little bit easier. Another cool thing you can do is edit the field Twig templates, or in Drupal 7 you can edit the tipple-fips, the tpl.php files in your theme. And one of the reasons you might want to do this is just to simplify the markup. By default, Paragraphs module gives you quite a bit of extra markup. And I guess it's not really the field groups module that's doing this, it's Drupal. Drupal gives you a lot of extra markup for every single field that you add, and it's just not really necessary. So for example, if we look into the field paragraphs HTML Twig file, this is what it looks like. Or this is an example of what it could look like when you're actually rendering your page. So we have node type page, field name, field paragraph, field items, field item, paragraph type column 2, blah, blah, blah. It's just like, it's lots and lots and repeated things. So like these right here, field items, field item, field items, field item, field item, field, it's a lot of repetitive stuff that isn't really giving you a lot of useful delineation between the different pieces of content. Paragraphs already gives that, a lot of that to you. So if you just remove them, it simplifies this dramatically. This is much more readable than the other markup files. You can see exactly what's happening. We have a paragraphs field, it's a 2-column paragraphs field. There's 2 of them. There's a first column and second column, and there's an image and text field within each of them. It's just a lot easier to read and understand.
And that other stuff is completely extraneous.
Right. Yeah, it's just
anything structural.
I mean, there are some cases where you might want to know, like, what is the third field within the field items of, you know, a list. But it's just part of what happens when you make a field have infinite number of, like, you can keep adding as many fields as you want within the field. It just keeps doing field item for each single one. All right, so that is it. We have a little bit of time, just a couple minutes actually, for questions. So I have a few questions that have already been queued up here. Let me take a peek. All right, so this person says, are your slides online? Yes, they are. Let me hide this again. It's actually this link right here, bit.ly/using-paragraphs-backup. And I will try to go through and add this to the session description as well, so it'll be there for you to grab. Grab another question. Okay. Jason asks, what is a reason to use panels if you can do layouts with paragraphs? It's a great question. Panels specifically gives you a lot of control over things beyond layout. So for example, there's lots of things like access control things, caching things, contextual things that are a little more complex. You know, show particular sections based on if you're this user or this role or whatever. And those are good reasons to continue using paragraphs. As well as if you really need that sort of editor interface, if they need to have even more control than what paragraphs gives you, that's another reason to use the panels module. But in the end, I like paragraphs because you can get down and change every piece of content. In panels, you'd have to create separate templates for each piece of content in order to get that. Or there's a panelizer module, I think would probably let you do that too. I don't know. It depends on your situation. All right, last question on the list here, and I'll take some more from the audience. Is the paragraphs module also available for Drupal 7 or just for 8? It is available for both Drupal 7 and 8. So if you go to drupal.org/project/paragraphs, you can get it and use it for Drupal 7 and 8. I've actually used it a lot more on 7. Les has used it a lot more on 8. There's actually, since we have this here, there's actually a lot of work being done on paragraphs in Drupal 8. It seems like it might be becoming a very popular solution to things like this, as well as other field layout questions. That's an area where it's kind of beyond my expertise or experience, but if you have questions about kind of the future of paragraphs, I'm sure Les would be happy to help you with that. And you could come and ask me too. All right, any other questions? Yeah.
So would this replace field collections?
Well, see, that was one of the modules that was like a potential to replace field collections. It actually, the paragraphs module started as a fork of the field collections module. So it started at the same place. They've ended up in different places, obviously, but they had different different philosophies on how it should be done. I don't know that I know the technical differences at this point, but obviously the interfaces are very different.
If you're using content moderation on content types that have paragraph fields, if you added a paragraph field, does it work? Does it show up in the draft?
The question was if you're using content moderation, if the paragraph field will show up in the draft version of the content you're viewing. I haven't used it before in that way. I don't know. I do know that part of what they've been working on lately as of DrupalCon with the paragraphs modules is one of the differences between the paragraphs module and another module I can't recall was that paragraphs module does work with revisions. And so if you have a revision, it will track that change versus others, whereas a few other similar solutions didn't. But I don't remember the other. Jason?
How do you control the HTML output of a paragraph?
Yeah, how do you control the HTML output of a paragraph? Yep. Yeah, so it's just like any content type. So you can use display suite to change, like to override the fields. So for example, you could change it to, instead of a div, I want this to be an H2 or an H3, or I want this to be a paragraph, P tag. You can also use the themes. You can go in and change with template files or Twig files, just like any other content type. I think there's a question over here.
I was just going to answer the revision one. It actually the revision is on the node that contains the paragraph revision, so that's where the revision lies.
Okay, thank you. Right there.
So on the back end, are paragraph types fieldable entities?
Yes.
And then, so when you have them in content, I guess what I'm going towards is like, it sort of looks kind of like the search record editor or other kind of admin enhancement plugins like that, but where I'd seen that kind of fall flat was what you ended up with was either like JSON or XML in a body field anyway. Like, does this have Drupal relationships?
Yeah. So I don't know if I can repeat your question exactly, but let me try to answer it and see if maybe it's close. So one scenario where I like using paragraphs is that you can go in and create views that target a specific field on a specific paragraph on a specific node, which you can't do if it's just all kind of meshed together into the body field or something like that. So then also, is that close to what you were asking a little bit?
Okay, yeah, I can go take a look at how it's working. So.
Okay. Also, if you tweet at LesMana, LESMANA, that's Les's Twitter handle, he knows a lot more of the technical details. He would be able to answer that for you.
Okay, cool.
Yes?
I'm trying to create a new content type that has a certain format. And would I use these paragraph types inside that new content type that I create?
Yeah. So you would set up your paragraph types. You would then go into your new content type and just add in a paragraph field or as many paragraph fields as you want. And you could say, add as many as, you can select and say, like, I want to keep adding more, so add another. And then you can make use of them however you want to. You're welcome. Yes?
Do you have any tips for when you get into a complex page with a lot of paragraph fields? It gets kind of crazy, especially for somebody who doesn't understand the abstract of what's actually going on, to conceptualize what content they're actually trying to edit and or remove.
No. Not when you get to lots and lots and lots of paragraphs. The closest I've gotten to being able to help manage to help people understand, like, this, when you see it on the live view, that relates to this thing on the back end and connecting, is using field groups. Being able to collapse everything except for the piece you're looking for or close to it, and make it a little bit easier to find. But even then, I agree, it can be difficult. Another great question for Les. One of the alternatives to paragraph, and maybe even paragraphs too, there's some sort of a weird relationship I didn't quite have enough time to talk to him about, but allows you to preview. Like there is a paragraphs preview that you can put in the page that would show you what you're about to do. I've never had a chance to get it to work, but maybe something like that. Like you could actually view what it's going to be before you save it. Maybe.
I know you're not a maintainer, but it'd be really handy to be able to have specific CSS on the paragraph fields in the UI to be able to make a 2-column
Right.
line in the edit screen as
right.
a 2-column thing.
Yeah, I agree. Being able to add CSS directly within the interface in this case would be really handy for this. Historically, in Drupal 7, it was a no-no. Well, you don't want to add CSS into the database. Basically, it's bad for performance and it's bad for all sorts of other reasons. But in Drupal 8, with the promise of you can actually export things like CSS or Twig from the UI into the code, it seems like it should be possible. I haven't gotten enough into Drupal 8 to know. Maybe not with paragraphs yet, but with
more on the whole admin interface is abstracted to the point where it's really hard to target a paragraph edit field. So like on the admin, on the node edit screen,
I see.
when it comes up as a 2-column,
to actually show it 2 columns.
To actually show it up
Right,
as
right.
2 columns would help a lot for a lot of
Yeah, so I think that the preview might actually do that for you. And again, I apologize. Previewer.
Paragraphs previewer.
Paragraphs previewer.
It's in dev.
Okay.
It's 3 months old, so it's...
Well, no, there was something like at DrupalCon that was part of the paragraphs module, or something. I don't know. I apologize for not knowing more about this particular area, but the promise of it was that it would let you actually edit view what you're about to edit. Like instead of seeing column 1 and then below it column 2, you would see them side by side exactly the way it's supposed to be. You might even see images rendered properly. You might even see the jQuery maybe working in line. So cross your fingers, maybe soon. Check out the dev module. Yes.
So I'll admit I have a bias in favor of panels, but admitting that, one of the nice things I like about panels is you can do one-off things. Like I'm gonna have a landing page. I'm gonna have another landing page somewhere else. That one's gonna be different. So I just create 2 panels pages. Each one is completely unique, customizable. And it kind of seems like panels, if you're going to set up like a content type, you got to give it some sort of paragraphs framework. Like, okay, regular pages are going to have 2 columns on it. Well, okay, I want this one to not have 2 columns, but I still want it. Like, what's the...
Yeah. So his the question was he's in favor of panels because it's really easy to create one-off pages, and it seems like from what I said, the paragraphs module requires you to set up a little bit of structure in advance. You're assuming that you will have a 2-column layout on every basic page, sort of. Not quite. That might have been my fault in kind of representing it, but you could basically add a paragraphs field. And the way that I've set it up historically has been you just add a paragraphs field that has all of your layout paragraphs on it. And then you can choose from the drop-down any number of layout paragraphs. You build out the layout, and then within those you can then embed as many paragraph content types as you want. So it's absolutely possible. If you're expecting, actually I've seen a lot of people use the basic page in Drupal, kind of like what you're describing. So if you want your About Us page and our landing page from your Google ad campaign to be very, very different and like whatever, you can set those up to be as different as you want. No one would ever know that they're the same content type. All right, I guess that's it. Thank you guys very much.